Hello, everyone, and welcome to Honey Badger Radio. My name is Brian, and I am here with the Talking Badgers on HBR Talk, Hannah Wallen and Lauren Brooks. As you guys may know, I am currently hosting the shows for them, and until things on Hannah's end become a little bit more stable. So I'm going to be helping out for the time being, but I do identify as a woman today, so this does not at all break the format, okay? And if you don't think that I'm a woman, then, you're a bigot, because we could always feel more masculine some days and more feminine other days. You guys heard about Demi Lovato? She proved it, so I don't want to hear it.
There we go.
All right, so anyway, Lauren, Hannah, welcome to the show. Today we're going to be looking at an article from the New Yorker, written by...
The New Yorker. You gotta say it right, Brian.
Yeah.
It's the New Yorker.
The New Yorker.
Yeah.
There we go.
But this isn't like that New York. This is like, upstate Manhattan, elite New York. This is like Sex and the City, New York. So do they still sound like that?
Yes, it's all the same.
Oh, okay. All right.
See,
That's not what my grandpa sounded like. Although my aunts did drink water.
Yeah.
Not water.
Water.
It's water, and you need water in your radiator.
Water.
Oh, water.
You need water in your radiator.
Like, what are you doing? I think if you go through New York, just the city of New York has more accents than the entire rest of the United States.
Yeah. But see, everybody likes to confuse New York City proper with the rest of New York State, which is nothing like New York City.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Just like Illinois. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
Like you leave Chicago and it's like farms and like rednecks and
Yeah.
miles and miles of giant fucking wind turbines. And but like Chicago is completely different, so
Yeah.
all right.
And I had a boss with a Syracuse accent, and then I had a coworker with I don't remember where it's supposed to be from, but it was the move your car accent. Move your car.
I'm walking here.
So like, it was fun to listen to them talk to each other.
Yeah. I actually find Boston accents a lot more endearing, because it reminds me of my aunts and uncles and cousins, because I have a lot of family in Boston, and Boston's different. It's people like they compare it to New York, but it's not. Yeah, it ain't the same. It is not the same. And I love the chowder. That they got down there. So. What were you gonna say?
Even Ohio's like that. Though. I like when I worked at the gas station, I had a guy come in and say to me, and this is exactly what I heard: "Strong your iron machine." Mm-hmm. I'm like, what? Because what the hell is an iron machine? And well, and this was in the middle of winter, and he just came in and asked me that, and I'm like, what's an iron machine? And so I'm standing there, and I said, "Can you say that again? Because I'm pretty sure I didn't hear it correctly. I'm really sorry, So he repeated himself, "Strong your iron machine," and I'm picturing like this guy wants me to put a article of women's clothing on an iron machine, and I'm really confused at this point. And he's acting like I'm an idiot, and he's repeating himself, "Your iron machine, your iron machine." What the hell is he talking about? So finally I said, all right, I feel like an idiot for not understanding you. Please bear with me. What does the machine do? He goes, oh, God, you use it to put iron in your tars. So iron, the metal, is pronounced I-yearn from where I come from. And air, the substance you breathe, is pronounced ire, where he came from, and I couldn't understand what the fuck he was saying. So So I got teased for months and months after that when I would do the outdoor task. They're like, "Don't forget to strong your iron machine." I'm like, "Shut up."
Okay, so I got a super chat from Jay for $10, and they say Tarman is definitely the face of patriarchy. Here's some beer money for the HB fan of Return of the Living Dead. Thank you, Jay. And yes, Return of the Living Dead is a very good movie. It's a good movie.
Great movie.
Yeah. Let's see. Okay, so I got this article from the New Yorker, which is sort of how we got on this tangent to begin with. And it was written by Zoe Heller, and it's entitled "How Toxic is Masculinity?" A crop of new books reconsiders feminism's stance towards men. So, sounds kinda promising, like when the part where it says these new books reconsider feminism's stance towards men. So what is feminism's stance towards men? And then like, well, if it is what I think it is, then these new books, they seem to like maybe they're actually going to, you know, take like an opposite position that opposite from the normal popular position, which is that men are terrible. Maybe that's what they mean by it. So we'll get into it and find out. So ladies, prepare yourselves. I'll read a paragraph. This is kind of long. I'll read a paragraph, and then if there's anything there you want to bite at, then feel free to jump right on that. Okay. 10 years ago, Hannah Rosen's book, The End of Men, argued that feminism had largely achieved its aims and that it was time to start worrying about the coming obsolescence of men. So basically men's being obsolete, right? American women were getting more undergraduate and graduate degrees than American men and were better placed to flourish in a feminized job market that prized communication and flexibility. For the first time in American history, they were outnumbering men in the workplace. The modern economy is becoming a place where women hold the cards, Rosen wrote. So, anyone have a thought on that? Does anyone know Hannah Rosen? Do you know about this book, The End of Men?
Yeah, there's good and bad in it. Like, it's true that the workplace has been feminized, and it's good that she admitted that. But she was kind of celebrating it.
Yeah.
Right. And there was a lot of people, I think, that mistook her writing for a defense of men, when in reality it was a celebration of a feminist victory. And what's happened in the workplace that has been really bad is with the workplace being feminized, in areas where women and men butt heads in any way, shape, or form, men are accountable, but women are not. Mm-hmm. And so we've had this rise of a department, or a change in a department, because human resources used to not have a name. It used to just be your company's way of handling things like payroll and who gets scheduled to work when, and gosh, we need to hire more people, or gosh, we hired too many people, shit like that, right? Who's going on vacation, whether there is a vacation, time and stuff like that. What kind of insurance to get once they started doing that stuff, which actually was a 20th century invention. And that was kind of it. And all of a sudden, with women coming in and insisting on levels of comfort in the workplace that men had never been given, you had human resources fielding that guy's looking at my butt, because there were at times legitimate complaints of that guy says if I don't sleep with him, I'm going to get fired. And it gets ignored when it's that woman says if I don't sleep with her, I'm going to get fired. Or that woman has started a campaign of psychological terrorism against me because I refuse to sleep with her. That gets ignored, or at least it has until about maybe 5 or 10 years ago. Some companies have started paying attention to that too. Mm-hmm. But that guy says I got to sleep with him to keep my job. That got handled, right? And there are laws now. There are a whole spectrum of things that we do about that. But we also take seriously that guy was looking at my butt, which is subjective. You can't prove or disprove that unless you have a video from the angle of your butt that shows eye contact, and nobody has that. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of this whole thing about men becoming obsolete because of that. It's bullshit, but it does have an impact on men, and there are things that need to be done about it, and that's not. Feminists don't care about that.
Yeah. This does seem like it's being framed as a celebration, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So, and of course, like, well, I don't want to get into this now, but there is something to be said for the fact that these feminized job markets only exist because men have essentially made our society comfortable enough that people would start thinking about adding them or building industry around that comfort. So just something I just want to put out there. Like, if we lost everything tomorrow, all of these comfy feminist office jobs would stop existing because we would be in survival mode. And then all of a sudden, the actual work that actually, like, people need to live and survive on would become the most important work. So,
and women wouldn't want to do that.
No,
because it's dangerous and dirty and dismal and sometimes degrading.
Yep. And of course, they would they might like propose to add an HR department, but I think that would be the worst idea. So anyway, just pointing out that just like all these other like social justice causes, they can only exist in a world where we have all of our other needs met. They only exist in a world with a maximal amount of comfort. And then people start bitching about my historical oppression or my power differentials. Only in a world where you have it so good could you bitch about things so much. All right, so the events of the past decade, the rise of Trump, the emergence of the Me Too movement, the overturning of Roe v. Wade, have had a sobering effect on this sort of triumphalism. The general tone of feminist rhetoric has grown distinctly tougher and more cynical. Cheerful slogans about the femaleness of the future, like the future is female, have receded. The word patriarchy, formerly the preserve of women's studies professors, has entered the common culture. Last year, in an article about women's exodus from their jobs during the pandemic, Rosen recanted her previous thesis and apologized for its tragic naivete. Quote, it's now painfully obvious that the mass entry of women into the workforce was rigged from the beginning, she wrote. American work culture has always conspired to keep professional women out and working class women shackled.
Well, duh.
Yeah, but who did that though? I mean, I don't even really know
women.
I don't even know that I buy this thing about, like, you know, American work culture has always conspired to keep professional women out and working class women shackled. Like, shackled to what? I mean, men.
Yeah, see that.
Yeah, go ahead.
That's the part of the sentence that I kind of disconnect with about keeping professional women out. No, it was always about keeping you as working class women. You were always only expected by the government to be a 50% increase in their tax income revenue. That's it. And you fell for it hook, line, and sinker.
Well, they didn't just fall for it, Lauren. They caused it. They advocated for it. Like, the reason why the average salary has gone down is because women have entered the workforce. So, like, when it was just men, you know, a man could support his family on his one salary, and, you know, that would be it. And sure, there were statists that wanted to tax double the population, and that's why they were advocating for this. But it was also feminists that pushed for this. So now she's pretending as though her ideology is in no way responsible for these imagined problems, because even today, you know, women spend way more money than men. So like you couldn't even make this argument regardless, because she's basically trying to say it's women that are hard done by this. And the fact is, I mean, I don't know if I would say men are hard done by this, but if anyone is boned, it's not women. So, you know.
Right. See, that's the thing. She's talking about this like women were pushed out of the uniquely pushed out of the workplace because they were women. And then the complication behind what really happened versus the simplicity of her statement makes this one of the stupidest statements anybody ever made about the 2020 and 2021 economic situation. I wasn't pushed out of my workplace. You know, my work. You know why? I was an essential worker.
Yeah,
I was an essential worker because you can't put disabilities on pause, right? So, and there were men who were essential workers because you can't put. Brian, I'm hearing myself through your.
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry. You can't put the need for water on pause. You can't put the need for electricity on pause. You can't put emergency medical needs on pause. You can't put the need for emergency surgery, for instance. You can't put heart attacks on pause. You can't put gastroenterology on pause. You can't put infectious disease specialty on pause. Right? You can't put any of that. You can't put the military on pause. Well, we're just not going to have an army, you know, this for 2 years. Can't do that. You can't put road work on pause, really. You have to have roads or you can't get places, and there hits a certain level of damage roads take from vehicles that you can't just say, well, we're just not going to fix them for 2 years. I mean, then you'd be Indiana. Sorry to the Indiana people. I gotta poke fun because we from Ohio do that all the time. That you leave the state and the roads like just fall apart. But seriously, there's a lot of shit that is, again, the dirty jobs, the tough jobs. People collecting your trash are mostly men, right? People who come in and rescue you if you get injured, if your house catches on fire. You know, any of the mostly men. There's some women, but mostly men. We've seen what happens in the country if you put police work on pause. Mostly men. The ones getting shot at, mostly men. It really makes the news when one of them's a woman. And people recognize the tragedy on a deeper level when one's a mom than when one's a dad. But it is mostly men that's happening to, right? You don't put that stuff on pause. So right. Yeah, the women that got the cushy office jobs, the human resources workers, the women who were working in daycare and educators, like educators didn't have to go into work. They could work remotely. A lot of women worked remotely. A lot of men couldn't, right? I had to carry a letter in my wallet for the longest time that said I was allowed to go out and I was on my way to and from work and stuff because I was an essential worker. Because we had cops, you know, asking people, "What are you doing out in the lockdown?" And that was just the norm. I still have that letter somewhere. I think it might actually still even be in my wallet. It says I'm an essential worker, and those things couldn't shut down. So yeah, this idea that it's just a sexist thing. No, it's women's choice. It's the same thing as the wage gap. It's women's choices determining whether or not in an emergency they're still needed. And in an emergency, just like Douglas Adams wrote in the Hitchhiker's Guide series, there are certain jobs that are non-essential. And there are certain jobs that you just can't put on pause. And the non-essential jobs get pushed out of the way so that people can do the things that are important right now. And feminists have been whining about that for 2 years, that jobs don't just become essential and important because women are doing them.
And yeah, I think that's where they're tripping themselves up, right? Because that's what they want. They want anytime a woman puts on a blazer and a pantsuit, that, you know, she must be taken with some level of, you know, severity or respectfulness that somehow she's earned, but you're just an assistant, whatever. You know, it's like, that doesn't mean that what you do is that crucial and vital and necessary for society. It means you've kind of leveled up on on your playing field. You might have been at a level 2 and now you're at a level 3, Karen. But that doesn't mean that everyone has to, just give you this level of respect that you believe you deserve, because I just love it how they're saying how women are pushed out. Well, men are expected to be there. They don't ever think about that. It's oh my God, I didn't get the job, the position, the raise that I wanted. I'm not a CEO, and this company doesn't have a female CEO. So it's always the women that are pushed to the back, right? No, it's not that. Maybe there's men that have been there forever doing the work. You don't. Just because you show up on the playing field, lady, doesn't mean that you get to win first place your first round at bat.
This is when you get the woman who's whining, I should be more important because I'm the under assistant, West Coast promotion bitch, right? And you got to do what I say. And the man standing there going, well, I'm the CEO, shut the fuck up, or I'm not going to be able to get through and turn your water back on, bitch. And of course she's going to get mad because she's been trumped by a working class dude. And how offensive is that? Right. If you look down on the working class, this situation had to have just been horribly painful. But for those of us who were raised to look up to the working class, this situation really showed how valuable the working class is in the U.S. And I think feminists are going to whine about that forever.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
All right, I'm going to read the next paragraph. I got some super chats, or another super chat. Meredith G gives us $9.99 and says, "Honey for the Badgers. Given feminism was rooted with upper class women, it was always going to thrive during prosperity." Yeah, that's kind of like the. Well, that's like the only place where I think an ideology like this could begin to rise, just like most others of the same style, right? Where it's basically like creating a framework of oppressor and oppressed. All of them come, I think, from, upper class society, like from people who have a lot of time on their hands. They're bored. They need like their life to have meaning, so they become activists. I mean, this is why so many Hollywood types take up the activist cause, because they, on some level, I think, believe that they know that their job, which is essentially a dancing monkey, it has limited application, and it might make them feel like all of their fame and their money and everything that they get for doing that, for being an adult pretender, is somehow like not like they feel a sense of guilt over it because they're really overpaid, and so they become activists, I believe. And it's part of it is, again, they're just bored, and they're like, oh, I'm famous, I influence people, I have a tremendous amount of sway over people, so I'm gonna basically fight for the climate like Leonardo DiCaprio, or I'm gonna fight for women like any number of female actresses, right? They all take up a cause, but it's only because I think that if they didn't do that and they didn't think that what they were doing is really important, then the only thing they'd be left with is looking at themselves in a mirror and feeling awful about it, which, by the way, is weird because nobody else seems to care, but they do. So anyway, thank you, Meredith. Let me see. So, super sobering, really bad for working class women. Men, especially conservative men. So, when she says especially conservative men after saying men, don't forget, she's just talking about men, not conservative men. She's just using the especially conservative men to slip past your ability to see that she's really just talking about men here and not any specific kind of man. It's just like they say when they say something like men, especially white men, they're just talking about men. Don't let any bias you might have against conservative men or white men or straight men or whatever obscure the fact that she's just talking about men. And then when she says especially, she's trying to get you to look at the especially part. But the qualifier is not necessary because she's talking about men, because that's how she started the sentence.
She just needed 3 extra words for her count. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, that could also be part of it. Men, especially conservative men, continue to wring their hands over the male condition, of course. Tucker Carlson appropriated the title of Rosen's book for a documentary advertised this past spring about plummeting sperm counts. But feminist patience for Twilight of the Penis stories has run out. All that time they spend sniveling about how hard it is to be a poor prosecuted man nowadays is just a way of adroitly shirking their responsibility to make themselves a little less the pure products of patriarchy. Pauline Harmange wrote in her 2020 screed, "I Hate Men." That's literally the name of the book.
She sure does. She absolutely does. I don't doubt it.
or an essay or something. More recently, the British journalist Laurie Penny, in her Sexual Revolution, notes that the systemic underpinnings of such snivels. Quote, "The assumption that oozes from every open pore of straight patriarchal culture is that women are expected to tolerate pain, fear, and frustration, but male pain, by contrast, is intolerable," end quote. Penny is careful to distinguish hatred of masculinity from hatred of men, but she nonetheless defines the fundamental political struggle of our time as a contest between feminism and white heterosexual male supremacy. In Daddy Issues, Catherine Engel calls for #MeToo era feminists to turn their attention to long overlooked paternal delinquencies. If the patriarchy is to be defeated, she argues, women's reluctance to criticize their male parents must be interrogated and overcome. Even the, quote, modern civilized father, end quote, must be, quote, kept on the hook, end quote, she recommends. And daughters must reckon with their, quote, desire for retribution, revenge, and punishment.
But feminism is totally not about hating men.
No.
Right? Not at all. So let's break this down for a second, right? Feminists are basically saying here, and this is a citation of a whole bunch of feminists, so it cannot be said this is not real feminism. This is the movers and shakers and arbiters of dogma within feminism, who are saying that if women have a rough time, men have to do something about it right away. But if men have a rough time, women get to make fun of them for being a poor persecuted man who is just adroitly shirking his responsibility to make himself a little less like a pure product of the patriarchy. So if you don't want somebody to be able to use a lie to jail you for 38 years for a crime that you didn't commit, you are just shirking your responsibility to be a little less the pure product of patriarchy. If you love your children and you are dedicated to giving them the best outcome of their childhood that you can, that you want to make sure that you teach them the things they know to be happy as adults, to be able to live and work within their communities and obtain things they want and have success in their endeavors and everything, you're not a good father. You're harassing their mother, right? And that makes you a pure product of patriarchy, and you're shirking your responsibility to make yourself a little less that pure product of patriarchy.
Right,
but if you don't want to be raped by your girlfriend, how dare you? How very dare you? You're making yourself a product of patriarchy. You're dominating her. Shame on you. Stop it. That's feminism. That's real feminism. Exactly. Real feminism is not, oh, you poor dude, you should be allowed to cry when you need to. It's shame on you for having interests and emotions that are not female approved. Mm-hmm. That's what feminism is.
Exactly. And look at this in this situation. If the patriarchy is to be defeated, women's reluctance to criticize their male parents, well, I'm pretty sure most of the time there will also be a female parent involved. And why wouldn't you then look at if you're a female, right? This is supposed to be about, oh, women, we're supposed to bond together. This is feminism, right? Ooh, woo, 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 woo. Why wouldn't you turn to your mother and say, why would you allow him to do that? If you really feel that you're being done wrong by your own parent, why wouldn't you turn to the one that you should feel more comfortable with and trustworthy? Why wouldn't you say, hey, mom, what the fuck is dad doing? He's on some bullshit. What is this patriarchy? But no, because she agrees with him. So if he's the one that's putting his foot down, you're just mad because you're having a temper tantrum. You're not getting your way. And it's not necessarily because a man says that this is what the rules of the house are, or you know what I mean? It's not.
Yeah. Well, and also, I'm pretty sure feminism does not suffer from any shortage at all of women who are willing to complain and bitch and whine and moan and cajole and nag and all that shit about their fathers.
Right.
Because, like, I've never spoken to a single feminist that did not do that.
Also, speaking of that word you use that starts with an F, why is she describing, like, what is a male parent? Isn't there a word for that? Isn't there, like, don't we already have a word for that? For the parent in a home that is a man? Or not, because maybe we can't define what a man is.
Yeah, we're not allowed to define what a man is. That's supremacy. That's male supremacy.
Yeah, and the other
biology's not real, guys.
The other thing I was going to mention is that in most cases, I would hope, fathers and mothers, or husbands and wives, would be in fact united in like terms of like their values and their belief about how they should raise their children. So, but it's not really a mystery as to why the author of this leaves the mother out of the equation, because she would not want to promote the idea or the narrative that, girls or daughters should rebel against their mothers, because then that would create a necessary dichotomy where one woman is wrong and one woman is right. And you can't do that because women could never be wrong. So instead, especially when it comes to feminism, right? Because they're trying to like maximize their PR reach. So what they do instead is they say, the modern civilized father must be kept on the hook. If the patriarchy is to be defeated, she argues, women's reluctance to criticize their male parents must be interrogated and overcome. So if the child interrogates or rebels or says fuck you to her father, it necessitates in most cases that she's got to do it to her mother too, because that is ultimately the goal, is to destroy the family, because that's what they want. So, and of course, if the mother sides with the father, then she's obviously siding with patriarchy, even if like her reasons might be, well, look, we both agree because we share similar values that, this is like what's best for you because you are our daughter. But they're trying to invert the authority and basically put children in charge of families. So
yeah, I can't. I've been in that situation with my own parents. I wanted to be able to go out. My mom thought that I should be able to, at least go to the mall or go past a block or the corner from the house. And my dad was super, super strict. Meanwhile, my brother, who traveled into Manhattan to go to high school every day, he could just go and do whatever. But me, I've had this, this restriction placed on me. And my mother realized that it was really kind of, at some point, it was a little bit unfair. And she wanted to give me, my rope so I could go hang myself, right? But my dad, no, he did not want it. And, I guess if I had done something that he felt that my mother should have caught or stopped or whatever, he would get mad at her.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and my house, my brother was younger than me, and there were things he was allowed to do before me, and my dad explained it to me. He was like, if somebody attacks your brother, he's going to break them in tiny pieces, and if somebody attacks you and he's not there to protect you, they're going to break you into tiny pieces. And I knew it was true at that time. I've always been a very mediocre fighter because I hate fighting. And my brother, he bypassed, he didn't like fighting either. He hates violence. He likes getting along with people. But his way of handling that is making sure that if somebody starts a fight with him, they don't want to fight him a second time. Mm-hmm. And like me, I let the guilt of hurting somebody overwhelm me, and so I suck at it. But in any case, dads notice that stuff, and a lot of times moms will overlook the difference in the capability of defending oneself. My mom grew up on a farm where her family, in addition to everything else they did, they had some cattle. And so she didn't have that misconception that you can just go places and do things without being alert to your surroundings and capable of handling an immediate attack from something that's much bigger and stronger than you. In her childhood, she had the situation where if she did not follow certain rules, like don't go into the enclosure without a quick exit plan and somebody to protect you, you can get gored to death. These things weigh shitloads, like they weigh as much as a small car, and they have sharp horns, and like they have sharp hooves, and they will trample you or gore you with the horns, or just ram you hard enough that you die of shock from the impact. It's like getting hit by a car. And so, yeah, I had the same thing. It's just it was better explained to me that, this is why. But again, you get into this situation. You look at this, right? And like I said, there's no shortage here of feminists complaining about their dads. And there's no shortage of feminists blaming their dads for things. And there's no shortage of feminists hating on their dads. But they never consider the possibility that when their dads put restrictions on them, and when their dads were cantankerous with them about those restrictions and everything, it was because they were afraid their daughters were going to get hurt. Mm-hmm. Not because they didn't like them, not because they didn't think of them as capable people, but because they were afraid somebody was going to do something bad to them.
Yeah. Yeah, and they have this way of misconstruing, like I was just thinking about my own example, yeah, my dad, I know he meant well, but was he overbearing? Absolutely. I think what these feminists are taking as maybe overbearing, or they're seeing it as overbearing, and they're just, rejecting it all the way because it's control over me and my body. But it's like, no, maybe they're just trying to protect you, and if you could just stop and look at it from somebody else's perspective. Oh wait, we're talking about feminists here, right?
Right. I mean, my mom tasked me with proving to my father that I could handle myself. She was like, well, if you want to be able to do these things, you're going to have to prove to your dad that you can handle it. Mm-hmm. She told me a list of things to do. I got to point out one other thing about this really quick. This woman talks about men like they are animals or some sort of unrefined savages, like a class of people who have never developed civilized tendencies, and refers to modern men as modern civilized fathers, civilized by women. Right. That's the idea, is that women are civilized and men are not.
Meanwhile, men built the very civilization that you're basing this whole theory on. Oh, Jesus Christ.
I was
so funny.
I was just gonna say that I think that it's interesting because my experience with my parents is sort of the opposite. Like, It might have to do with the fact that like I'm a man and you're a woman, because I think that fathers are very protective of their daughters.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that because of that, they may become overbearing. They may, do too much. They like to protect them. But then, like, I also believe that, at least in my experience, that mothers can be overprotective of their sons, and they can do like something very similar. So, like in my house, I have three or two brothers, and my father was always the more permissive parent. He was always saying, "Oh no, let them go out, let them, whatever. These guys can take care of themselves." And my mom was the one that wanted to enforce like strict, curfews and stuff. So I think it's, in general, women are more risk averse, and in general, mothers tend to like, express that because they don't want anything bad to happen to their kids. And fathers in general are more permissive of letting people like test their boundaries, but fathers, when it comes to their daughters, especially if their daughters are like maybe like they've hit puberty or something, I think that they worry more about them and they want to protect them. But part of that is because that fathers also have a low opinion of other boys. So that's another one of those things that it comes out. And if you don't believe me, then listen to any dad who has a teenage daughter or had a teenage daughter and is talking about like all of the dangerous predatory young men that are out there. And a lot of the time, those fathers will do that because they think that that's what they were like when they were young. And I'm saying they think because maybe in some cases they were, but I would guess that in many cases they were just pursuing girls because they liked them. And then their behavior is being reframed and repackaged as predatory. And so they start thinking maybe I was a predator. Because, like, imagine, like, if a woman can just claim, I felt unsafe, or I felt like you might have raped me, and it's like the 1950s, and you've pulled up in your, with your greaser haircut and your convertible, and she rejects you when you're at, like, Makeout Mountain or whatever, you might feel like shit because you might feel like you've done something wrong, and really, everything was fine until she changed her mind. And you carry that guilt, though. You carry that because when men get rejected for appearing to be creepy or predatory, that sticks with you. Like that's the last thing men want. Like in general, men want women's consent. So if they don't think they got it, then, they can feel pretty bad. And then they start thinking, well, maybe this isn't a me problem. This is a man problem. And then they start like looking at all men in the same way that they have been forced to look at themselves by, what is usually an exaggerated narrative about men. And then if they, have a daughter later, they basically like treat their daughter as though she's in the same danger that they, you know what I'm saying? So it's almost like a product of this feminist idea, or this idea that men are dangerous, is sort of like creating a pattern, if that makes sense.
And well, there's also like boys and girls grow up with other boys and girls have always had, within their crowd of girls, there's always been that one chick that would fuck anything that moves. Right? If it's breathing, right? If it's moving, it doesn't even have to be breathing. It just has to vibrate. But there's always been that one girl that will fuck anything that moves, and then she'll be on to the next guy, and then she gets pregnant, and then the next thing you know, there's some guy that's stuck with 18 years of child support because she's not going to marry him, and even if she would, she's not marriage material. Or she has an abortion, or she accuses him of rape, or she accuses 15 guys of rape because she's embarrassed that somebody found out she would fuck anything that moves, right? So there's that girl that every mom is like gonna suspect every girl her son brings home of being. And every guy knows some guy in his crowd of friends that just doesn't get boundaries. Right? Or doesn't care about them. And there are women like that too. Right? The girl that fucks everything that moves might not be the one. Right? The one that bullied the shit out of all of the other girls might be that one. And you want to protect your kids from the person who knows no boundaries. And of course, women grew up being taught as girls to protect themselves from being rape victims. Boys don't. They grow up hearing messages about how they're potential rapists, but they don't grow up hearing messages about, hey, you're also a potential rape victim. You have a right to protect yourself from being raped. You have a right to protect yourself from being falsely accused. Nobody tells them that. So they get to high school and they meet the girl that will fuck anything that moves and might accuse them of imposing on her afterwards. And they meet the girl that has boundary issues, and they fall victim to those girls. And it's mom who watches out for that. But mom's kind of handicapped because mom doesn't think of the boy as a potential victim of the girl with boundary issues or the false accuser. She thinks of her son as the potential victim of the child support predator, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas the father, he knows all the bad things a guy can do. And even if he only knew one guy that was like that, his daughter is in danger from every guy potentially being like that because he sees the women around him being completely oblivious, no knowledge whatsoever, no understanding whatsoever that there might be somebody like that. Yeah. And he's grown up as a boy being taught that if there's a conflict between a male and a female, it's the male's fault. It's his responsibility to smooth things over. It's his responsibility to protect her. She's not a threat. He is, right? So he doesn't think to protect his son from the liar or the girl with boundary issues who might force him into something he doesn't want to do or any of that. He only thinks to protect his daughter from the liar or the guy with boundary issues who might force her into something she doesn't want to do. And it's very unequal. And both parents are at fault for that. Yeah. But feminists will act as though girls are restricted and boys aren't. I think boys face 10 times the restrictions that girls face. We get told, to be careful and maybe not go certain places without a partner to make sure that we're safe. But all of the ways in which we are allowed to behave toward other people without anybody coming along and saying, you're a creep, you're a scumbag, you're violent, you're evil, you're bad, shame on you, you're dirty, you're mean, none of that. We can get away with things that we should not be able to get away with. Mm-hmm. Boys have to walk a very straight, narrow, highly scrutinized, and highly judged line, or they get one of those labels, one of those really nasty identity killing labels, and their social death is permanent in their social environment. Girls can just go join another clique. Boys will get the shit beat out of them every day by all the other boys at school if they offend the girls. But yeah, whine about your dad for a little while longer, feminists. Because that helps everything.
All right, I got some super chats and a super chow. I'm gonna read them really quick. Let's see. Senior Sticks gives us $5 and says, "Do you think Austin Simon is the example of toxic masculinity white feminists don't want to touch?" Austin Simon is the guy who was killed when he was trying to beat up that bodega owner. No, I don't. I reject toxic masculinity outright. Most likely, these men that behave in an antisocial, criminal way are the products of femininity. So I think that they're the products of single moms, which means there couldn't be something toxically masculine that comes out of that because those men don't have a model of masculinity to base their behavior on. Plus, they are sexually rewarded by women in their community that essentially date them. Remember, he did that because his girlfriend, if I'm talking about the same guy, he did that because his girlfriend essentially used him against the bodega store owner. So,
here's the thing. Most people grow out of using violence to solve personal conflict. Most people grow out of it by the time they reach the age of majority, when you can go to jail for it. The overwhelming majority of people grow out of that if they are raised in an environment with two adult parents of the opposite sex that give them examples of what a mature, responsible adult behaves like, right? It is only when toxic, female-enforced social obligation is placed on a guy that that hasn't had that benefit, that he acts like that he starts solving interpersonal conflict, even minor interpersonal conflict, with violence. It has nothing to do with his masculinity. It has to do with a lack of masculinity and a lack of maturity.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like they usually didn't get out of that stage because there's no father or some equivalent, although a father is probably the best, that will show them how to resolve, conflict. That there are ways to do it without fighting. I mean, like if the guy had the right kind of, if he was raised right, he wouldn't even be dating that woman, because he wouldn't mess around with somebody like that.
Right.
that would use him as a disposable weapon against her enemies. That's why he's dead, and she, as far as I know, isn't even looking at jail time. So,
and it's on her parents too, because if she was raised right, she never would have asked him to do that.
Exactly. So yeah, we got to draw the line. The buck has to stop somewhere. So no, I mean, I wouldn't say that that's toxic masculinity. I mean, like, is it just toxic masculinity because it comes from a man? Because obviously, women in the same communities, they're not afraid to get violent either. It just doesn't, it doesn't usually go further than some chick getting like stabbed or her weave pulled out or something like that. But the impulse is the same.
Yeah,
So,
I was just gonna say, like, the behavior that they are expressing is overly aggressive, overly violent, right? How is that different from toxic masculinity, other than the gender of the person who's committing the behavior?
Yeah, and that's another thing I wouldn't give them, because first of all, nothing about the toxic masculinity term is at all legitimate. It's 0% legit.
It's bullshit. It's bullshit legit. But if we're talking in their terms,
I know. Yeah, I agree with you. I was just explaining to the guy who sent the post, if you say, do you think that this person is an example of the toxic masculinity that white feminists don't want to touch because the guy was black? I'm basically saying that it has nothing to do with race, obviously, nothing to do with that. But more than that, if you even try to use the term toxic masculinity as a way to get a gotcha on feminists, you lose. Do not use their terms. Their terms have zero value. You don't need them. You have the truth on your side. And if you have the truth on your side, you don't have to use any of their bullshit made up academic terms. Because if you use them at all, you give them validity. Because now you're saying that terminology is useful. That terminology does have truth to it, which means they can keep using it. But if you just treat them like they said rubber baby buggy bumpers, and it was basically a completely worthless statement, and you just say, I don't know what any of that means, but I know it's not real, then they can't use the language against you. That's why I throw that bullshit out. Patriarchy, it's garbage. There's no, the only meaning of patriarchy that is at all valid is basically just the notion that, a man's lineage can be traced back through his name, through the fathers, right? And that's just a fact. But that's not the feminist definition of patriarchy. So,
to understand why terms like this are bad to adopt, right? You have to understand what the term toxic masculinity is used for by feminists, right? They're not using it to differentiate between characteristics in a man that are immature versus characteristics in a man that are admirable. They are using it as shorthand to tell you that when there are characteristics in a man that lead him to behave in unadmirable ways or malicious and bad ways, that they are there because he is male and acting in a masculine way, not the other way around. And they have to ignore that these same behaviors exist in women in order to do that. It is a way of saying man bad, woman good. He
Right.
acts this way because his masculinity is toxic,
Right.
not his masculinity has toxicity because he acts this way. And you cannot accept that. If you accept that, you accept that it is masculinity that makes the behavior toxic and not the behavior itself that is toxic.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
And it doesn't even have to be physical, like just like mansplaining and manspreading. It's
Oh my God, yeah.
it's a non-physical thing, but it's still this masculine somehow. It's something that only men do. Really?
They invented man
Yeah.
breathing. They just don't call it that. They call it mask refusal.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So anyways, thank you, Senior Sticks. And then Senior Sticks sends us another $2 and says, why is women's pantsuit more respected than a man's? I don't think it is. I mean, I think that pantsuits look silly on women. And it's funny
Feminists
because it's
demand
still...
that women's pantsuits be more respected because women are doing something that's unusual for them, but men have to do it all the time, so it shouldn't be.
In general, though, a woman in pants is just not... Like, that's actually the norm. So I don't know, like... and what else is funny is that a woman's pantsuit is not a unisex outfit. It's a woman's outfit. So a man couldn't walk into, like, you know, the business section of some clothing store and buy a woman's pantsuit because it's still marketed and made and constructed for women. So it's still women's clothes, you know?
Yeah.
Like, it's...
and it's marketed and made and constructed for curvy women, specifically for curvy women. I look like shit in a woman's pantsuit. I'm not curvy. I don't look good. I look really bad. And so I don't wear them. So it's made specifically for very feminine women. And it is a sign of feminine power and female power, and that's why women make that demand. Respect the pantsuit. Like, don't buy into that shit.
Yeah, so I don't know that it is. I mean, I think feminists want us to think that it is, but I don't think that it actually is. Derek Workman gives us $10 and says, fathers know that boys don't really grow up until they hold their firstborn child in their arms. Well, I mean, we used to have, like, coming of age rituals for men. I actually kind of think that we might need to bring that back. Not because I don't think a man is a man unless he's done it, but I think that it would be better for men and boys. So I do think there's something to it. I mean, some cultures have it, like there's bar mitzvahs, and they do that. And I think that it is, I don't know, like the way, because it's like how do you honor a man? That I think it's something like that. So I'm not necessarily advocating for, you know, something retrograde or super conservative, but there should be, I think, something like a ritual that young men can get involved in that will essentially, like, raise their status within their community. Everyone will see that they've done this thing, and everyone will acknowledge that they are now a man. And I think that actually means a lot. It's like the scene from Kingdom of Heaven, where, if you guys don't know about that movie, it was a Ridley Scott movie. It was about the Crusades, and it's centered on this guy named Balian. And he was a knight. He was made a knight by his father. And then, like, at the end of the movie, they're about to, like, essentially defend this city against an invading Islamic army. And everyone's morale is low. Like, they don't think that they're going to be able to fight this army off and everything. And so what Balian does, and of course it's all drama, right? But what he does at the end is he knights everyone. And he knights them all just before the battle. And there's this whole, like, you know, cool little speech that he gives and all that. And after that, there's, like, this, you know, like, cowardly, doubting priest. And he's like, you're not going to make somebody a better warrior just because you knight them. And then it shows, like, all of the men, it's all men, all of the men who have basically like kneeled down and allowed themselves to be knighted, and they all like look like, you know, they're ready to fight now, they're ready to die. And so it actually, I think in a way it's saying what I'm saying, that it does do something, you know, it does have some kind of effect. And it was a great moment. So if you guys haven't seen that movie Kingdom of Heaven, I recommend it, but only the extended director's cut. Don't watch the theatrical release. It's not good. All right, anyway, so where was I? Oh yeah, I read all that shit about hating men. The combative tone taken by these writers is hardly a surprise. One might argue that a movement currently scrambling to defend some vestige of women's reproductive rights can be forgiven for not being especially solicitous of men's sperm counts. One might
They
argue...
always gotta act like women don't have the right to not have sex or to use birth control and use it in sufficient measure to avoid pregnancy in the first place.
Well, yeah, they have to frame it that way because, like, they want normal women to feel like if the normal women knew that all they had to do was be careful about who they have sex with, be careful about how frequently they do it, or at least take it into consideration, be careful to use protection and to insist on protection, and they will probably be fine. Like all they and you know, like, I guess don't get raped. But again, not likely to happen because most people don't get raped. But those would be like the reasonable ways to essentially respond to this changing of Roe v. Wade. But then that doesn't serve the feminists because they got to keep women afraid. They got to keep them scared.
Coincidentally, that this is also the way that you avoid the monkeypox.
Yeah.
So, hey.
Yeah, that. Well, I mean, you know, like you just don't want to do butt stuff. I think in general, or have sex with someone who does butt stuff. You know.
I was gonna say the monkeypox is a herpes virus, right? You avoid it the same way that you avoid herpes. You avoid it the same way that you avoid lip herpes. You avoid it the same way that you avoid chicken pox. Like, duh. But a lot of STDs are like that, right? You avoid them by being careful, and if you're careless, then you better take measures to protect yourself. Except with herpes viruses, really avoidance is the only thing. You have to not encounter the virus.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. But of course, I'm not going to mention that either. So,
No.
So one might argue that it isn't feminism's job to worry about how men are doing any more than it's the job of hens to fret about the condition of foxes. Wow.
Oh my God. So she just portrayed all men as predators, right? Foxes, the relationship between foxes and hens is very strictly that foxes break into hen houses and eat them alive. Like, that's it. There is no other relationship between hens and foxes. That is the way feminists think of the relationship between men and women.
Well,
they don't have any reason to, but that's what they think.
Yeah, and I will give credit where credit is due because she's just telling us right out, right? So they're not pretending like they care about men. They're not pretending like, you know, that they are all about equality, which is the argument they make. We care about men too. No, they don't. They're just telling us this. Like, men are foxes, women are hens. I thought they were going to call them roosters. You know, but no, not because roosters, they cohabitate with hens and reproduce. Yeah,
roosters are male chickens, hens are female chickens. Hence, the comparison would be better.
It would be if you had a grasp on reality. But two recent books claim otherwise. A History of Masculinity from Patriarchy to Gender Justice by Alan Lane, by the French I guess it's published by Alan Lane. By the French historian Ivan Jablonka, in French, and What Do Men Want? Masculinity and Its Discontents by Nina Power, a British columnist with a background in philosophy. Both contend that the drift towards zero-sum war of the sexes language is a bad thing for feminism. Although their diagnoses of the problem are almost diametrically opposed, both authors make the case for a more generous and humane feminist discourse capable of recognizing the suffering of men as well as of women. Hens, they acknowledge, have legitimate cause for resentment, but foxes have feelings too.
You know, by the way, roosters protect hens from predators. There's videos on YouTube. There's one that went around Twitter a while back that I really liked because it does show a very fundamental instinct in male animals that live in mated pairs with female animals, or that even keep a harem of female mates, right? That they are incredibly protective of the females of their species. And you see that in our species. Men are extremely protective of women to the degree that when one man steps out of line and attacks women, the other men will imprison him. They will beat the shit out of him. The men in prison will beat the shit out of him. He's lucky he doesn't get killed, right? And roosters will sacrifice themselves to protect the hens from the foxes, or in the case that I saw, I think it was a hawk that had attacked a hen, and the rooster showed up and just beat the hell out of it and sent it flying. And feminists ignore that. They will completely ignore men's benevolent behavior toward women, or worse, they will call it sexism. They would rather let the hen die at the hands of the hawk or the fox than acknowledge the fact that the rooster gives a shit and is good and actually is beneficial to the hen. Right? Well, they want to do that. So they won't acknowledge anything good you do. They'll turn around and compare you to the fox every single time.
Exactly. And it's stated right there. You know, they acknowledge hens have legitimate cause for resentment, but foxes have feelings too. It's not about the fact that the fox has feelings. It's the fact that you're calling him a fox. It's the fact that you're calling him this predator. Maybe that's why he has these feelings, and maybe you should not do that, right?
The fact that you're not recognizing the difference between the rooster and the fox,
right?
Or acknowledging that the rooster exists.
Well, they don't have an interest in that difference, right? That's why they in her scenario there are no roosters. Like that they're just foxes and hens. So there are no roosters, even though most men are probably like more likely to be roosters than foxes. Okay. And like the foxes that are out there, they were probably raised by hens. So I got
a rooster in the house.
With no roosters around. So there is a super chow I got from the manliest of the straw men, which is Pitmaster, for $10. And he says, if I am correct, even Gloria Steinem recognized that some of us have become the men we wanted to marry. Now, this quote gets interpreted in a favorable way for feminism, but it's also a big warning. When your motivation comes from envy, then you are likely to end up wishing that target of your envy ceases to exist. Well, that was the purpose. So, I mean, you know, Gloria Steinem was you know, she was always that way. You know, she was basically.
Gloria Steinem was a CIA psyop. I'm sorry, but like
Gloria Steinem
and
is
I know
CIA.
people think that's a psyop. Yeah, people think that's a conspiracy theory, but it's true. It is flat out true.
Absolutely. So that's all of the super chows, and unfortunately, I have to go pick up my wife. So I gotta like end the show here, but it's a good place because it looks like another chapter or section is starting, and I do want to do more of this article. So why don't we?
You want to continue it next week?
Yeah, why don't we continue it next week? That's exactly what I was going to suggest. And we'll go through the rest of it. All right, unless something like really crazy happens. So we're gonna wrap it up here. This is you know, a shorter show, but about an hour. I think that's still good. So let us know what you guys think about what we discussed on the show today. I'd love to see your comments. Let me just make sure I'm not missing any, because sometimes people try to send last minute super chats and it makes it pretty hard for, you know, me to keep up with those. So I'm gonna put a done in here. So if you guys like this video, well, first of all, thank you, Hannah and Lauren, for coming on. Your commentary is always welcome, of course, and I think that you know, the articles like this are super interesting because it's like when the mask comes off and they're just telling you what they really think. And there's no like there's no pretense, there's no like PR, you know, there's none of that. It's just like, yeah, you know, this is what we believe. So let us know.
I mean, we've already seen Lori Penny eat her boogers, so of course
yeah.
nothing.
That's pretty much every article she's ever written is Lori Penny eating her boogers.
Right.
Oh, gross. All right, so if you guys like this video, please smash like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed, hit the bell for notifications, leave us a comment, let us know what you guys think about the article thus far. There is a link to it in the description, and please share this video because sharing is caring. Thank you guys so much for coming on the show. I apologize if you're watching or you were trying to watch this on Rumble and it wasn't working. Something is wrong with Rumble. I wasn't able to set up a show there. So hopefully that will be resolved before the next show. So thank you guys so much for coming on today's episode of HBR Talk, and we will talk to you all in the next video.
Men's rights activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have like a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.